Hi everyone, I'm Matt Andrzejewski, and I'll be your professor for Psych 216 Research Methods this semester. So this is an intro video about the course and a little bit about me. As it shows there's my name with my office is in Laurentide, LT 1228, and my email address in case you need to get a hold of me. So why do we do research? What's the big deal? We do research because we have questions that we don't know answers to. You don't know something. That's the basic reason we do research. In psychology, we ask a lot of different questions about things like, why does this person talk to inanimate objects, which is a common symptom or a common behavior seen in some mental illnesses. What do drugs do to the brain? Is on social media, on TV, we've seen varying accounts of what drugs do to the brain, and are we convinced by them? We're not quite sure. What is the safest way to construct a crosswalk? Believe it or not, psychologists do a variety of research projects, or have conducted a variety of research projects. The field of organizational behavior management, the field of human factors design, is really dedicated toward making a safer world for humans, whether it be in cars or in factories or offices or whatever. What are the best ways to study are questions that educational, clinical, cognitive psychologists have asked. How can I improve my memory? What causes depression? Is pot safer than alcohol? These are all questions that have a psychological component to it, maybe a question that's interesting to you. So, in the world, when we ask these questions, we can find out the answers a variety of ways. We can use common sense. That's one way of answering a question. The problem is that common sense can be contradictory. So for example, a good example is you often hear the common sense phrase, birds of a feather flock together. You might also hear opposites attract. Well, those two commonsensical points contradict one another. It can't be all the same. Birds of a feather flock together mean that you like people that are like you. Opposites attract means the opposite. Those two things can't be logically resolved, so they contradict one another. We often appeal to tradition when we're looking for answers to the questions. Is pot safer than alcohol? Is a question that you might have even had a discussion with your friends in a dorm room late one night or whatever. You might have had a conversation with your parents over the dinner table, or overheard some people. And your parents, people my age and older, often appeal to tradition to answer that question. They know that pot is more dangerous than alcohol. Pot is a gateway drug. They say all these things. That's knowledge based on tradition, not on anything else. You might get an answer to a question from personal experience. You might have experienced both the effects of pot and the effects of alcohol and decided that one was safer than another. But how much are you like others? Is your experience like other people's experiences? Is there a bias that might be present? How can we generalize from here? So personal experience is another kind of problem. Often we ask experts or authority figures about questions. We might go to a doctor, we might go to a scientist, we might go to an expert in the field, right? That's an easy way to answer a question oftentimes. But the problem is that there's a lot of questions for which there's a lot of disagreement. Experts in drug abuse tend to fall on one side regarding whether pot is safer than alcohol or not. But there are sort of exceptions, and there are points sort of on both sides. And whether you use either one of these drugs has to be, to a certain extent, you have to take these risks and benefits into consideration. So there is disagreement with experts and authority figures. And then the other question we have to ask is, what are these people experts in? We can contrive expertise so easily. That's often a difficulty. So in psychology, what we believe is that what I believe and what I hold to is that the best way to answer a question in psychology is to conduct research. So we do this in two basic ways, and this is the reason we have research methods courses. The first is, if we have a question and we want it answered, what we can do is we can go to the literature. We can go to the library. We can go find out what other people have found out, what other experiments and research projects have other people conducted. And not only that, we can look at how they did it, how they answered their questions. We can ask questions like, what did they do to come up to this conclusion? These two questions, how did they find out, what did they do, or really how did they find out, is what we would call an epistemological question. It's a question about how they came to know something. That's in philosophy what we call epistemology. And then the second way we can find something out that we don't know is to do an experiment. Now, generally speaking, we don't do experiments unless we can't find an answer in the literature. And if we find an answer in the literature, we don't jump right to doing an experiment. If we have a question where we're like, I don't know how to do this, let's go do an experiment. We generally don't do that. We generally go out and find out what other people know first, or what other people have demonstrated first, and then we take the next steps. Only when we find a flaw in an experiment or a demonstration do we suggest, or a gap, do we suggest an experiment or propose an experiment to close that gap or to correct that flaw. So fair warning in the sense that when we don't know something, we don't jump right to an experiment. Generally, what we do is we go to the library, or virtually now. We search the literature bases, we do a literature search, we find out what other people know, and then it might answer our question, it might not. And if it doesn't, then we go to the next step, which is an experiment. Experiments involve data, collecting measurements, gathering evidence. In psychology, that evidence has to be observable. It has to be objective. And then we logically connect the evidence to form a conclusion. One of the other aspects of psychology that's becoming important in experimental design is what we call replicability. And that is, I have to be able to do an experiment, describe the experiment, design the experiment, so that somebody else can do it. You're not just going to take my word. I'm going to give you enough detail so that you can go do it yourself. Notice that all of these various things, both what's in the literature, what's in the library, and the experiments that I'm talking about, are all public. Anybody can do these. They're in plain sight. There's no secrets here. That's a very important aspect to research, and that is that it has to be public. There can't be secrets. There can't be hidden elements. You can't pull back the curtain and see something different than what was out there. If you fake it, you're going to be found out. So that's why we do research. And the course, this course, Psych 216, is basically about how we look at literature, how we critically evaluate it, how we find out what other people have done, and then how are we going to design an experiment, how are we going to conduct an experiment, how we are going to logically link data to experimental questions. The question of experimental design and execution is the other aspect of the course that we're going to be talking about. So that's why we need research methods. We have questions that we want answers to. We have questions for which we don't know the answers, and we want a way, the best way, to answer that question, which are the methods of science. In psychology, there are some particular, maybe even peculiar ways in which we conduct experiments or conduct research, but we'll get to those little nuances when we get there. Now, why am I qualified to teach this course? Well, I was a research scientist for 12 years after I got my PhD in experimental psychology from Temple University. I was a research associate or research scientist at UW-Madison. I conducted research on a lot of different things, on choice behavior, on impulsivity, on drugs like THC and alcohol, Ritalin and amphetamine. I've studied neuroplasticity and learning. I've done brain surgery on rats. These are all figures from various papers that I've published in the peer-reviewed literature in behavior analysis and behavioral neuroscience and behavioral pharmacology. These are figures all from papers. I have 25 or 30 peer-reviewed journal articles out there, so I'm considered, people say I should know a little bit about conducting research and experiments. But I'll have to say that I don't know everything, and that I'm still learning, and that there's a lot of things that are still in flux. We figure out better ways to ask questions in terms of the methodology, in terms of procedures and protocols that we use to answer questions. So I'm still learning. I'm also a statistician. I published a textbook called Learning from Data, which is really committed to using data and logic to answer questions about psychology. So in this course, the objectives are going to be to apply the scientific method, to identify different methods, to collect and organize data, conduct statistical analyses, and generate graphs and tables, to carry out the process involved in conducting a research report, synthesizing pieces of a research report, writing a research report, and then critically evaluating empirical investigations described in original journal articles. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish in this course. We are going to accomplish it through readings in a textbook. There are 12 chapters in this Goodwin text that we're going to be using called Research in Psychology. I love the book. It's a great book. It's a wonderful book. It's well written. It's well argued, well done. It's short chapters, but with each chapter is going to be a preparation guide. These are due weekly, which are going to be focusing your interest, focusing your attention on particular aspects. You'll have to answer the questions and submit it. So there are 12 prep guides during the semester for the 12 chapters. We do one a week. Every 2 weeks, we're going to have a probe or a quiz on the preparation guide. This is going to be addressing the first prong of our sort of course, and that is sort of book knowledge, let's say. Reading the textbook, reading about the history of experiments, ethical experiments, experimental design, experimental hypothesis generation, how we conduct statistical analyses, how we write conclusions, so on and so forth. So the book-based knowledge is going to be in these two. A second prong of the course is going to be conducting a research project. So we're going to start with a literature review. We're going to start with interests and have a meeting about it. You're going to write paper reviews. Then you're going to be generating a proposal. We're going to have another focus meeting, you and I, and then we're going to write a proposal and a protocol. I'm going to generate data for you, and you're going to write up a research report. So that's the second prong, maybe the major prong of the course is a research project. And then the third prong sort of this class is to practice, relearn, review, redo statistical analyses. So throughout the semester, there's going to be 4 data analysis assignments, which will help you identify how you're going to analyze your data that are given to you for your research project. So this class is very much structured like every other class that's taught in research methods at this university, except for one thing, and that is that you are not going to be collecting any data. In most research methods courses, you actually conduct the experiment you propose, and you actually collect the data. And you're not going to do it in this course. And I do this for 3 reasons. I'm going to collect the data for you. I do that. The 3 reasons are, number 1, you can do anything you want to do. If your research interests are in dementia or Parkinson's disease or the effects of THC or fentanyl or on a vulnerable population, that's great. You can do research. You can do research on with fMRI. If you were collecting your own data, you're really limited in what you could collect. You could probably do a small survey, which for most people isn't really that interesting. I want you to do something that interests you. The second concern about collecting data is the ethical concerns. There are strict ethical guidelines in conducting psychological research, and we can't violate them. And I'm afraid that people might do that in the context of experiments. So to protect various populations, the professional nature of psychology, we're gonna avoid those questions. And this course is also online, so it's going to be really hard to do. You are going to be analyzing data, though. So once you submit a research protocol, I'm going to be collecting your data and submitting it to you in probably an Excel spreadsheet format. You're going to tell me how many subjects you need, the demographics or whatever. You're going to tell me what questions you need answered, what instruments you need measurement on, what data you want, and I'm going to generate it for you. I'm going to go out and collect it, and then I'm going to submit it to you, and then your responsibility is going to be to analyze that data. So to start, just go to Canvas and we'll look through the syllabus, and you can dig in. You've already been here, obviously, probably, because that's how you found out what was in this course. This is Canvas. You probably started with an announcement page or something like that, but you can see the whole course is laid out. We're going to be doing this by weeks. If you have any questions, give me a holler. The syllabus is posted here. The nice thing about the syllabus is that at the bottom of the syllabus, is a nice timeline, is a nice calendar of all the assignments that are due. So again, if you have any questions, give me a holler. I'll be sending out weekly reminders and emails. But again, thanks for watching and welcome to the course.